When you see ADAMA, you see unbridled Black excellence. Whether on the African continent, throughout the diaspora, or in your indigenous residence, it represents our unrivaled global presence. Whether prologue, present, or prescient, it's a tribute to the days of the troubadours and chevaliers, to the griots heaven sent, that raised protest and said none rest until we put down local and global unrest. To those who refuse to be reticent, to those who refuse to be silenced, it's a love letter to Black love, it's a warning to white violence. It's years of tears, it's eons of joy. At ADAMA, you will see yourself, your elders, your peers, men and women, ladies and gentlemen, children, girls and boys. It's a place you can explore, digest, and enjoy in a minute or a week, in a year or an hour. And what makes it unique is that it's complete and completely ours. It's a seed that blossomed and bloomed into a beautiful rainflower. It's an acorn buried beneath a radiant rain shower that grew into a tree. That voice you hear in your ear on the breeze says, when you see ADAMA, you see our unrivaled elegance, you see our undeniable presence, you see our joy, our pain, you see our struggle, our reign. When you see ADAMA, you see unbridled Black excellence. Man, my car doesn't talk.
Excuse me.
Excuse you, Mama.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the show. We're having a few difficulties, but Rosa is on her way. We'll be starting shortly.
Me and hear me?
There you are.
We practiced, but I don't know what happened.
Technology. Technology. It's supposed to be your best friend.
You guys can't see me. Can you see me now? Can you hear me now?
Sometimes. There we go.
Okay. Okay, that's actually wild because were we not just talking for 45 minutes? Okay, let's see. My name is Rosa Duffy. I'm an archivist and artist living and working in Atlanta, Georgia. I own a bookstore and a small library space on Auburn Avenue called Four Keeps Books, and I will be your program moderator for today. The program is in connection with ADAMA's current exhibition, A Shield Against Darkness, the art and scholarship of Pellom McDaniels III, curated by Clint Fluker and Fahamu Peku. This exhibition is on view until June 28th at Pittsburgh Yard, so everybody go see it. This conversation will center around the legacy of the former scholar, curator, author, historian, artist, and athlete, Pellom McDaniels
Third.
with our guest, Dr. Shady Radical. I'm going to go through your bio, which is incredible. But Dr. Shady Radical is a mother, performance archivist, educator, and founder of the Radical Archive of Preservation. Her interest in preserving Black memory, production culture, and women's work has led her to earn her PhD in moving image studies at Georgia State University, an MA in costume and curatorial studies from New York University, a BA in art history from the College of St. Elizabeth, and an AA in fashion business from Berkeley College. Her professional experiences include working in costumes in Atlanta's film and television industry, teaching art history, dance history, and costume history at Spelman College, curating art shows, archiving the work of Black performance companies, and serving as board member for Society of Georgia Archivists. She is also co-chair of Dance USA's Archiving and Preservation Group and is currently a social justice fellow at the MLIS program at University of Alabama. As a researcher and a traveling memory worker, she is exploring different ways local communities hold, protect, and share memory through mothering and care practices. Am I still here?
Yes, you
Okay.
are.
Am I talking to myself?
No, it could have cut out a little bit there, you know.
Who knows?
That would have been the right one.
I thought I had the good Wi-Fi. I don't know. But I'm very happy to be with you today. Very, very honored to be talking with you.
Yes, let this also act as a catch-up since we actually need to catch up in real life.
It's a shame. It's a shame. I was just telling you, I am deeply regretful that I haven't spoken to you in depth sooner. I mean, you're just fascinating. I think a lot of our practice kind of overlaps. I don't have all the degrees, but I do find you very inspiring, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you about was the fact that you kind of had a non-linear, non-traditional path into getting into archival work. I think that's an important thing to highlight and kind of touch on, because this is a very academic space, and some people feel as if there's only one way to get into an archival practice, right? And I think the way you did it is very interesting. So I know that it kind of started from your work in costume and curatorial, studies and practices, and it kind of came from your work in film and television, and it kind of developed out of a necessity as opposed to just, that's what you were brought in to do. It kind of came from you feeling as if
I could actually finish your sentence while you're stuck. Okay, there you go.
I can still hear you. I just, it stops for a second. But yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, cool. Yes, the same reason that kind of brought me to Atlanta is the reason that I'm also in archiving today. I started, I'm from Jersey, Plainfield, New Jersey, where I attended college at University of Delaware, studying biology. I was really good in grade school. My family wanted me to be a physician, which also would have been the first doctor in our family. A medical physician or PhD anyway. So they were really excited about me going further in my education from a very early age, which I resisted. I was like, yeah, no. So I started working in fashion, actually, after working at Macy's Herald Square, the big Macy's in New York. Then I was working in fashion, so doing fashion shows, all of Fashion Week. I did that for a number of years. And then I got the opportunity to work with Tyler Perry Studios on For Colored Girls. And that was the summer before my master's program at NYU. It was an internship. And they were looking for, someone that could do this. They contacted somebody at FIT who actually knew me. I was at Berkeley at the time and knew that I would like to be involved in that kind of work because I was seeking like more theater kind of experiences. So I did the Tyler Perry Studios work. And after that, that actually brought me down here to Atlanta. Half of that was shot in New York, and the other half was shot here in Atlanta.
Oh,
So
okay.
and they're like, should I stay in New York? She actually said, go to Atlanta because there's a lot of opportunities there. You have the experience, you'll work. So I did. And my show got pushed like 2 weeks and I was broke and I only had $500 and I was renting like a room for $125. But I eventually found more work and started working as a costumer and worked often for quite a few years. It was at Tyler Perry Studios where I realized the need for just a system of organization around costumes. The focus was on the now, like in production, right? It's very fast paced, it's improvisational, it's about getting clothes on the bodies and bodies in front of the camera. And so there wasn't much attention on like how we saved and preserved those costumes. Also for other shows or for the end of a season and beginning a next season, oftentimes you have to pick up from where you left off. So that would take so much time on like finding things. And I was like, I can totally like do this. So I talked to Mr. Perry and he was like, oh yeah, I like that idea. Like, why don't you go ahead and do that? And I was like, oh, well, I don't actually know how to do that. It was just an idea. So I went back to school for my PhD and I studied for 7 years, film, media, and theater to think about how I could establish an archive at Tyler Perry Studios. So towards the end of my program there, I went back to Tyler Perry Studios and I started working in the warehouse. I actually was teaching as a graduate student at Georgia State. So I was bringing my students to Tyler Perry Studios warehouse and we were organizing and unboxing things and finding fat suits and like all this really, really cool stuff and creating the foundation of a archival system for the costumes. So yeah, that's the short version of it, but it was definitely created out of a need to organize and preserve, which also kind of informs my practice now because my focus is on costumes and their relationship to the body and how we can get closer to Black and Brown experiences through investigating clothing as historical materials. Now, Atlanta has yet to have a costume archive, so I'm working on it. But you know, there are places that do have small collections, like Atlanta History Center, and you know, Tyler Perry Studios has a huge collection, and SCAD, of course, has a collection, but it's still not it's not focused on Black life. I would say Black everyday life. And that's what I would really, really love to see is a costume collection focused in that way.
Beautiful. That's very interesting. I don't know that I've even thought about the fact that Atlanta doesn't have a space where you can go and look at archived clothes. Is that something that's popular in other spaces? I mean, I guess in New York it would be very popular because of all the shows that they do there, but that's very interesting. I knew about the Tyler Perry stuff, but I didn't know like how it got there. So that's very cool. I feel like that kind of moves us into the space where you were talking about how you're a performance archivist and you're like a multidisciplinary archivist, I guess I would say, and you're an artist and you do lots of different work, but it all kind of ties back into
Rosa froze again, but maybe I think I know where you were going with that. Oh, there you go. Every time I'm about to say like, okay, I will
right now. It's really trying to play me and embarrass me because I'm like, it just worked. But yeah, I'm curious about that title, if it's something that you came up with. I'm going to rush through my questions so I can actually get them out. But I'm curious about its origin and what that means to you, because I've never heard it used before. And I was really intrigued. Like when I was reading and watching some of your interviews, I was like, that is such a interesting title. So what does it mean?
Yeah. So my practice is kind of tri-fold, I would say. I am an archivist in a more traditional classical sense that, I put things in boxes, create organizational systems for people, for companies, digital objects, and more material, tangible objects. But I So here, okay, there we go. Thinking about maybe even cultural tours as there's my daughter Wendy. You want to say hi? That's Wendy Oya Radical. Say hello.
Hello. You are in the show.
Yes. So she said that she was going to let mommy do her work today. So let's see. I'm a mother first, so let's see. But let me actually do this, okay? Thank you. So there's the workshops where I kind of try to reimagine what other forms of preservation could be, like tours or maybe journaling, of course, like oral histories, but kind of these untraditional senses of preservation. And then I do performances. So I will actually go into the archives, pull material out of the archives, and create these performance pieces that essentially create more access to the material. So like today I'm at 7 Stages. I'm participating in their Curious Sensory Encounters program, which is an immersive experience. I'm in here in the dressing room where my performance piece will be presented. And on the ceiling, I don't know if you can see it, those are actually photocopies of Pearl Clegg's archive. So this piece is inspired by Ilya Kaminsky's Deaf Republic, which is a book that we read for the program. But also I've been investigating Pearl Clegg's work for some time. I did another piece here in 2021. So on the ceiling, you have reviews, you have correspondences, press releases from the time that Pearl Clegg was in residence here in 1987. In 1987, she produced a piece with Kenny Leon and Zarin, her soon-to-be husband at the time. And they would have been actually in this dressing room moments before they were performing on the main stage. So this is kind of like another iteration of thinking about Pearl Clegg's work. We also think about like mothering and forms of communication and how we communicate resistance, how I teach my daughter how to resist and how to love, how to be loved. So we have painted these pyramids on the back wall because last year we traveled to Cairo to think about, again, history and preservation. She calls it Egypt, I call it Cairo. There's a middle ground. But that performance piece is essentially, I would even say, is kind of similar to Pellom McDaniels' practice, where he's also trying to get closer to the work. So when I went to the ADAMA exhibition, I was really, really surprised because I was familiar with his archival practice, but I was not familiar with his art practice. So to see there seems to be a connection between the exhibitions he curated and the art he created. Maybe he was working through some issues. Maybe it was another way to spend time with the material he was working on. Maybe he was kind of working through some issues. But I see my practice kind of as the same way. Like I am trying to get closer to the person, the creator of that material. trying to maybe even understand different experiences so I can understand more of their kind of like finished work. But if I can understand maybe their lived experiences, I can offer another perspective. So for me, and perhaps other curators have under practice too, where they're all trying to explore it in different mediums. Performance just happens to be my medium. So I'm trying to literally get at the ephemerality of performance, the intangibility of performance, the embodied knowledge of performance in multiple ways, like through classical ways, through, being just present with people, but also like performing and what does it mean to perform. And then I'll just say one more thing about Pearl Clegg. She wrote a piece. It was a lecture she presented in 1988 on collaboration. And she said that her and Zarin would have performance being not real or simulated, and how can we create performances that are more like ourselves, where we're presenting more of ourselves. And I think about that, like the for lack of a better word, the kind of fakeness, right? That you're trying to create something that doesn't exist, and not to dismiss performance in that way, but what does it mean to like create life that you do live, right? So my performances are very everyday living, right? You'll see moments of, me doing rituals, moments of me braiding Wendy's hair, moments of me doing laundry, in order to like bring the focus on not only like things that we imagine as women's work, but these everyday things that we do to keep ourselves going, keep ourselves motivated, keep the joy.
Right.
We all have those practices, and sometimes they fall off, but it's a way to bring us back to the middle.
Beautiful.
For me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think kind of, putting these kind of ritual practices into another form where people are witnessing them as opposed to participating in them is another way of archiving, which is what you're doing. So it's like people get to take it in visually as opposed to, participating in it themselves. So that's very, very interesting. And actually the question I was going to ask, because I knew you were so frustrating. And I wanted to talk about Pearl because Pearl has been such an important part of Atlanta's history in general, but she's really done such a beautiful job of collecting stories about herself and about other Atlantans. And she actually wrote a piece on my parents' wedding back in whenever they got married. I'm not quite sure. And I thought it was really funny. It was a funny piece. So I'm a big fan of hers, and I love what you're doing with her work and with her journals. I find it really interesting. And I was going to talk about the ties between kind of what Pellom was doing with his practice and the fact that he was the curator of African American collections at Emory Rose Library before his passing in 2020, and how he had all of these other, he lived many lives before he got to that point. And I thought it was really interesting that he tied all of those things together towards the end of his life, and was really focused on getting all of these materials together for us to view and be able to enjoy that, and that he experienced, like I said, many different lives. He didn't just traditionally do archiving, even though he did in a very traditional sense. He also was a football player, an athlete. He did, he was an artist. So I was going to ask you about how you felt about the exhibition at ADAMA and what you took away from it, because I do see a lot of parallels between the two of you all's work. And you were talking about, when we talked yesterday, you were saying something about an installation that he had behind his desk, and kind of how it tied you into what you usually do on stage, something that you usually have during your performance and something that you saw within his work. So I was going to kind of go back to that. I don't know if you said it because I've been in and out, but do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I really did enjoy the exhibition at ADAMA. It was a pleasant surprise. It just was not what I expected. It got it enabled me to see another side of Pellom.
Right.
I met Pellom very briefly on two occasions, actually at events at Emory. I attended the Still Raising Hell. Maybe it was the opening or the closing, but there was like a talk with Camille Billups and James Hatch that night. And yeah, so I've always been inspired by his work and always admired the Emory African American collection, because as a performance archivist, that's one of the main repositories that I use. I was just there a couple of weeks ago looking at Esther Jackson's collection, who was one of the first African American theater professors, and she spent some time at Clark, I believe, but which is a collection that is still not all the way processed. Mm-hmm. So it was really, really nice to see it's really nice to see unprocessed works, because you get to explore all over, right? When you look at the processed collections, it's somebody's logic is there, and it's so well organized that, you'll skip over things, right? Because you're like, oh, I don't need that, with whatever the label is, I don't need that. So with the unprocessed, you're just like, you fall into a rabbit hole, which we love, in archiving. Right. So the exhibition, there was this installation that maybe, I don't know whose design it was, whether it was Clint or Fahamu's or someone else's, but it was a really large photograph of his home office. So behind his desk, and it was like, thousands of books, a huge bookshelf. And you could just sit there and read the spines of these books and like, oh, I got that book. And like, there's a connection there. Like, ooh, we could, if we had the opportunity, we could talk about that book, or what he thought, or did he read it, or who gave it to him? Right. Or is there notes in that book, or, so there's that. And that actually brings me to another thought, because in one of Pearl Clegg's pieces, she talks about how can she collaborate with Zarin, who is a Black man, as a Black radical feminist. And like, she said, I've been, studying Black radical theory for 10 years, and he hasn't read anything. So how could we even work together? So let
me not say anything, but
that was like, the reason why she is this guy is because of how well she articulates Black women's experiences, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's so sophisticated. It's so well put. I'm like, that's what I'm trying to say.
Right, exactly.
She does it so well. So with that installation, you could kind of see where you connect, maybe, and just imagine for a moment, like, the conversations you may have. In every one of my projects, I always bring the books that inform my work. So when you are in the performance, there will be a moment where I'm like, these are the books that I'm kind of thinking about when I have created this piece. So here's some of them, the ones now.
I was about to say, let us see them.
So we, some of y'all may know, some of you all may not, but Clint and Fahamu definitely knew me before my last name was Radical. I actually adopted the last name Radical when I married Wendy's father, and we both adopted that last name. And then 1 month later, she was born. So my mom likes to say she's the firstborn Radical. But that comes from the Black radical tradition. I am an advocate of Black Marxism, and even with its issues, I still believe that there's a lot of value there. And then Saidiya Hartman's work, also Monica Miller, whose book on slaves to fashion also talks about how clothing was used in colonial times to gain liberation. Artists in the Archive. Of course, Adrian Piper is a performance archivist who I adore. And
love her to death. My favorite.
You know, I've tried to get up in her because she has an archive in Germany, and I tried to get up
in Berlin hiding. So
and she was like, "No, maybe next time you're in Berlin." And I'm like,
trust
"Yeah,
me, I tried to as well." And she's very particular, and I love her for that. I respect it. So
I do too. So I've tried twice when I was in Berlin, tried to actually reach out to her, and it not yet, but I will keep trying.
You'll make it. She's all about persistence. You know what I mean?
Yes, I believe that. So again, Pearl Clay's work, Fred Moten's work, of course, the Encyclopedia of Archival Science. I like to have that around because I'm always trying to challenge it in order to, make more spaces. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, really, really important pieces that inform my archival practice because of how they inform performance. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
You
I know
certainly did, because I was going to talk about your name change. So that's very interesting. And I love your ties to Adrian, because she really was doing the thing and continues to do the thing and is very critical of kind of the way that art spaces operate. And for that, I'm appreciative of her, because she keeps me on my toes. I'm always getting into Pearl's work. I mean, into Pearl's work and into Adrian Piper's work. They're both big inspirations of mine. But yes, I think it's very interesting that you have the books with you. I've said interesting about 100 times, but I find it, it's critical to have these pieces of work, because even if you're not physically reading them in the moment, it's something that like a spirit lives within these pages, and they're in the room whether they're open or not. So I love that they're there with you all the time while you're doing your work. That's neat. I wanted to get into the Atlanta of it all, because I did know that you were from Jersey. When did you move to Atlanta?
In 2012.
Okay.
2012. Yep.
Very interesting, because I wanted to get into the Radical Archive Project, also known as TRAP.
Yes.
Which I loved to hear, because when I was reading about the Radical Archive Project, I didn't necessarily immediately think of the fact that it's also, boils down to TRAP. I think that inherently as Black people, but especially Black folks in the South, we are story keepers, we are storytellers, we are memory workers, which we'll get into because that's a term that I hear you use a lot. But I think that kind of the modern day griot exists in Atlanta, right? And some people dismiss some types of storytelling and don't see them as kind of the same practices that we've done forever, since before slavery in West Africa. This is stuff that we've always done, and people dismiss messages because they don't like the way that they're presented or the way that or the things that are being said, but there's still stories that need to be told and need to be kept. So when we were tying kind of the TRAP and the radical preservation and archival work, I found that, and I thought it was a really beautiful marriage, and something that kind of you can see right away. It's kind of in your face, as opposed to having this long conversation about the modern day griot, right? So I really, really found that to be revolutionary and radical in itself. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about TRAP and about what you do there, and about why it's important, and why about kind of, well, we can get into memory work after that, but I think that it'll probably evolve into that when we talk about it. But I think what you're doing is really beautiful. So I'd love to elaborate on that.
Thank you. TRAP music, TRAP culture, trapping deeply informs my work. I'm not a hip hop scholar or anything, but being in Atlanta and being in this space, in this milieu where, everyone is hustling and grinding to make their dreams come true, is so inspiring. And I've come from, I went to school in New York, in the city. My mother was born in Brooklyn. That's a different kind of hustle. here it is, you can be exactly who you say you are, you know. And I think, you know, it can get tricky for some people that are, you know, coming, who are new, and right, they're like, oh, you're so and so, and people will be like, yes, I've been doing this my whole life, like since day one, and like maybe they haven't actually done a particular project yet, but you can be who you say you are. And that really aligns with what I believe it about preservation and archiving. I believe that you should be able to be who you say you are in the afterlife. Even though that directly challenges like archival science, right? Even in the history of archival science, there needed to be you know, a space between production and preservation to not influence or bias the record, right? So today, I feel like we've had our stories told for us. We've had to be whoever other people imagine us to be in history so much that at least in the archive, you can be who you say you are. So that deeply informs, like, it would not be trapped with if I wasn't in Atlanta, right? Like, it is very much Atlanta. However, it can travel too. I believe there's these oppressive conditions everywhere, beyond our, you know, Wendy have traveled a lot from Southeast Africa, Tanzania. We do a project every summer there. And me and Wendy are actually going to backpack across Europe starting June 11th, flying into Paris and then going as far east to Bosnia, and then maybe to Oman, in order to study memory practices. I want to learn and think about, you know, how people remember everywhere, you know, and hopefully incorporate that into my practice. But also, Wendy very much knows that it is her responsibility to take over this archive. Like, this is hers, right?
Yeah.
And I struggle. It's been so important to me because I've struggled with that with my own family. I've had many conversations with my parents about what do they think their parents passed down to them that they've passed down to me, and it's been very hard to articulate it. And not because they haven't passed anything down to me. It's just those conversations did not happen in that way.
Right.
So it's very intentional and conscious to me. Like, I make a conscious effort to teach her that these are our things. This is who we are, and this is what you have to protect. And this is your responsibility to it. You can do whatever you want, you know, on the side, but the archive must remain.
Right.
And it includes like my family history and my mom and my grandmother and my great grandmother. It includes like all of the stories that I've been told. And I often wonder, as an archivist, this is something that stays with me, how I can do this work professionally and then not do my work at home, right? Like, how much time do I spend with my own archive? How much time do I spend on, you know, organizing materials after a show and make sure they're in the best place and they're representative of what happened there? And I try to make more and more time for myself, which to me is a form of self-love and self-care, which is what I want to pass on to Wendy. Like, doing this work, preserving your memory, is self-love, is self-care. So I've done lost track of the question.
I was just talking about the Radical archival project and what you guys do there. But that's a good introduction. I mean, that is kind of what it stems from, is keeping all of your memories and your things and your heirlooms and the things that have been passed down to you in some kind of organized state so that they can be passed down to the next generation. I think that's what it stems from. But I know that you guys have a practice that includes other people. Right.
Yep. Yes. So we do create these workshops, as I mentioned before, but also just recently we launched the digital archive. So on the website, theradicalarchive.com, you could now see records of all of the materials that I've archived already, being uploaded to the site. And some of those has an image, and some of those will be like a program from Ballet Ethnic Dance Company. And you'll be able to see who the costume designers were, or the dancers were, or the choreographers. You'll be able to access all of that information. Also working with Bagamoyo Africulture, also working with a costume designer at Tyler Perry Studios right now, whose name is Deron Cherry. So it is everything from like me actually putting hands on things to also training other up and coming memory workers. I work at Spelman College. So in all of my classes, I have taught art history there, dance history, theater history, costume history. We are in the archive. And by the time you leave my class, you will know very well what an archive is and your responsibility to it. And so you'll gain those skills in my class, but also you'll help me outside of class, putting together these collections, making sure, and also curating exhibitions. We curated a really nice exhibition for Ballet Ethnic Dance Company on the 30th anniversary of Urban Nutcracker a few years ago. And in that exhibition, you got to see, 25-year-old costumes. You got to see early programs. You got to see Miss Nina's notes and Mr. Waverly's notes. You got to see some really, really cool objects. And it's all tied together, right? Archiving and curating, it's both sides of the same coin.
The same coin, yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about, actually, I want to hear more about the Ballet Ethnic Archive, because I don't know that we got into it that much. And I heard you speaking about it another time, and I know that it's like a mom and pop and it's been around for 30 years. And I'm just curious, I think you said the first Black ballerina to enter. So can you elaborate on that just a little bit? And then we can move on to, I really want to talk about Rooted in Memory after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you restate the beginning of the question?
It's the Ballet Ethnic Archive, like what that place is, or the Ballet Ethnic Company, what they do.
Ballet Ethnic Dance Company was started by Nina Gilreath and Waverly Lucas in 1990. It actually was established at Spelman College by an early supporter was Moselle Spriggs, who was in charge of the dance department at the dance and performance department at the time. She offered a young 20-something-year-old couple rehearsal space so they could start their company. So they actually started kind of as early residents of Spelman College dance program. They used to work with Spelman children's program. So it's interesting because now I'm at Spelman and I get to also continue to explore that history inside and outside of Ballet Ethnic. But Mr. Waverly and Miss Nina actually met in New York at Dance Theater Harlem, where they were actually partnered by the Arthur Mitchell. He actually put them together and said, "You two will dance together." And I mean, I guess if he said so, right? Like that is what you do. Like you do.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah. So Waverly Lucas actually followed Miss Nina down here to Atlanta, and they eventually started this dance company. So they had, they've been going strong for 34 years now. And they're one of the oldest companies. And Miss Nina is one of the very few Black ballerina that has started a company. So yeah, they are historic in many ways.
Very much so. That is unbelievable. I wanted to get into some of the workshops that you do, because on top of everything, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I was looking into, I've known about Rooted in Memory for a long time. I've been following you, and I know that's one of the workshops that you host, and you host different folks that work in kind of how to archive your own collection. So like your family photos, maybe family notes, journals, all of that stuff, things that your family has passed down over generations and maybe hasn't been digitized or cataloged in a traditional way. I have worked with Sierra at For Keeps. She's done a great workshop there a few times, and it's been really beneficial to kind of everyday, person that just wants to get their family history into some sort of catalog in some sort of organized way. I was curious about Rooted in Memory, where you hosted, what it kind of stemmed from, and some of the people that you've worked with in that workshop.
Yes. So I'm a huge fan of Sierra King. She does really fascinating work, helping people to build their own archives, build your archive, but also how to describe photos and how to keep photos. And so she's definitely been someone who's also in my consciousness as I'm doing this work. We're also in the University of Alabama MLIS program together. So she is a comrade for sure. We did the Rooted in Memory workshop series together, but also the work of Julie Johnson, who is a dancer. She is the chair of the dance and performance department at Spelman. And she thinks about embodied memory and how to access memories through the body, through movement. In that, the last workshop series, we also worked with Holly Smith, who is the college archivist at Spelman. So she would help people understand what it's like to donate materials to a official repository like Spelman Institution. But also the work of Robert Thompson, who is a local, he does cultural tours in the West End, and he really advocated for how people can create their own tours of their neighborhoods and why they should. And I thought that was really, really cool. You need a license to be able to conduct tours in Charleston, South Carolina. So that speaks to how history is controlled and narrated. But here in Atlanta, you have this opportunity to tell your own story. So we should take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. I love the idea of being able to narrate your neighborhood and introduce people and moments and times that don't get the archival care, as far as the institution. So yeah, we think really creatively about what it means to preserve these memories and how we could do that together, but also separately in our own homes and in community.
Love it. I know that around 2:45 we were supposed to start doing kind of a question and answer. If anybody.
Okay.
I lost you for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know if I interrupted you, but I was saying it's 2:48 and I know they wanted to do a little question and answer portion. So if anybody has any.
Yeah.
If not, I will kind of get into, let's see. Can
I ask you a question?
Sure. You must.
I really I want to hear about your archival practice if you can share with us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think ours overlap in many ways. I am approaching it from you do it in traditional ways and non-traditional ways. But you've talked a lot about the fact that we're kind of the last to be thought of when it comes to archival processes in institutions and academic spaces, right? So spaces like JSTOR and all of these I actually have a friend that's working with JSTOR now to get a lot of Black papers onto the site for free, which is great. But I think there are a lot of barriers as far as getting to Black material, or getting Black material to Black people, or getting Black material to Black folks that don't exist within the institution, right?
Yeah. Oh, Rosa. Come on back to us, Rosa. We got a lot to say, Rosa. There we go. I knew if I started
Can you
singing.
hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
No? Okay,
Yes.
cool. So, and I love the African American collection. It's one of the largest ones in, the country. And I love Auburn Ave Research Library. It's why I exist on Auburn Avenue, because this was the first library, but before it moved to the space that it's in now, it was the first library to hold Black collections and not have Black folks in the basement. So these spaces, if they didn't exist, I certainly wouldn't exist, and I certainly wouldn't be interested in the things I'm interested in, right? I was born a mile away from where my store is now. These kind of stories are, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. These kind of stories are just very important, and I want them to be in the hands of people that don't necessarily feel safe and might feel policed in academic spaces, haven't had a good experience in those spaces. And I also feel like I approach preservation
Rosa. Come on back to us, Rosa. We got a lot. There we go. Okay. Okay, you must have finished.
Here we are. Shut up, we don't want to hear about it. Like, turn her off. I think all the folks that are doing the real world, the work, like in traditional preservation spaces, are very important and critical to us having these stories for the rest of our lives and for our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. But I also want, like I said, folks that don't feel necessarily invited into those spaces to also have access to the work, right? So that's why I open For Keeps. I collect people's collections that find that For Keeps is the place that they want their work to be. I also curate a lot of it based on you were talking about rabbit holes, on the rabbit holes that I go down, because while I might not be a scholar in the traditional sense, I enjoy learning. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but yes.
Rosa. Come on back to us, Rosa. Rosa.
Let's see if I can join my I don't know why this is happening. I'm actually terribly frustrated. But yeah, so we host workshops. We hosted Sierra. We host a friend of mine, Kennedy, who just graduated from Georgia Tech. We host, a bunch of folks that don't feel like they really can meet in other spaces and have their voices heard. And we're a community space, so oral histories are shared in For Keeps. You're not supposed to sit there and be quiet. Loitering is encouraged, so you are supposed to be sitting at the table interacting with this work. And we have work that you can only find on JSTOR, you can only find in an academic library, and it's for you to touch and interact with, right? So it extended out of my art practice. So I'm a sculptor, and I might steal from you and say now I'm a sculptor archivist or an archivist sculptor. A lot of I got into collecting through the fact that, or through my art practice. So I was very influenced by the written word. I was translating what I was reading into some sort of visual, right? So that's really what got me here. I actually went to Parsons for fashion initially. So the parallels are there. I'm like, that's crazy. I was in New York. So my art practice really. Okay, we're done with me because my computer hates me. So let's. But
Well,
yes.
I want to say a couple of things, maybe three
Okay.
things.
Okay.
Number one, I would like to go on the record to say I would like to work with you in For Keeps.
I would die to work with you. For the past week, I've been like, oh my gosh, there's so much I want to do. My mind is already turning. So I would love to work with you. And I'm so glad you said that.
Yes. So let's definitely bring that into the universe, make that into fruition. Second thing, what I would love to see Emery do, if I have anybody's ear.
Clint, are you listening?
Okay, Emery. Is they have this fascinating collection, but they haven't really built the collection around Black performing arts specifically. So it's still hard for people like me. And I'm starting to do this on my website already, where I'm listing Black performance companies, listing Black performance artists based in Atlanta. They have the Camille Villa of St. James Hatch collection, but that's based in New York. They have other collections like the Holder collection. These other collections are still very outside of Atlanta, and I still feel like there's so much in Atlanta that we can build an amazing Atlanta-based artist collection. And if you need help with that, I am available. But then the third thing I wanted to say is please check out the website, because Wendy and I will be doing this traveling memory work tour across Europe, and I would love to stay engaged with as many people and continue this conversation while we have these check-ins as we tour across Europe. We will be with a backpack and using all modes of transportation starting June 11th. So I really want to stay in contact with my community if that's possible.
Are you going to be recording that? I'm sure you are. That's an interesting question to ask, but how can we follow kind of your journey over the summer?
Yes. So there will be a blog on theradicalarchive.com.
Okay.
We started a GoFundMe page if you want to buy us dinner or something one night. It might get a little dark. Who knows? But yes, you can follow the page and our Instagram page, The Radical Archive. We'll also be posting there, keeping everyone updated. But yes, we will start, and hopefully we'll make it to Oman by August.
Yay, that is so very exciting. I'm really, really interested in how that goes, and to hear about other memory practices, throughout the world. That should be very interesting. I also do want to highlight, I think I got cut off when I was saying that I'm very appreciative of Pellom's work, of Clint's work, of Randall's work when he was there. They all have been very supportive of For Keeps. Clint has
I'll say this one more thing. If you don't have anything to do tonight, there is Curious Sensory Encounters at 7 stages from 4 to 7. Also, we have one more show tomorrow from 7 to 10. It is pay as you wish. All is welcome. You'll have this really cool immersive experiences, and we can meet in person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Shady. This was wonderful. I'm very, very honored to be talking to you, and I'm excited to meet up soon and do something together. I think that would be great. And thank you to Fahamu, and thank you to Clint for putting together the exhibition that's up until June 28th at ADAMA. I think everybody should try to go see that, because Pellom was really, really an influential person in African-American archiving and collecting and curating and artistry. So everybody, if you're lucky enough to meet him, and even if you weren't, please go make some time to go see the exhibition at ADAMA.
Yeah. I did want to share this picture of Fahamu. This was back in the day, but this was in his garage. I was working on an article for Liquid Blackness, but this became part of a exhibition organized with Lyft, Clint and Clint's exhibition at Hammond's house, based on the work of Bell Hooks, called Home Place. So this is everybody all together.
Yep.
And it's a quote from Bell Hooks there that says, "A small bit of earth where one rests is always subject to violation and destruction." Home Place.
I love that photo. Wait, what year is that from? Did you say?
This was from here it is, 2015.
2015.
Shady. Look at Shady.
Doing the work. Doing the work.
Ooh, if I had to rely on my memory, girl.
That's real. It's real. It's a good place to stop because that quote in itself. But thank you again. I'll see you soon. And thank you to everybody who came to witness.
Thank you.